Welcome to another episode of When Death Awaits. I am your host, Umar Hussein.
And I am Chris Ramirez.
And we've got Uncle Rich.
That's right, Rich Ramirez, otherwise known as Uncle Rich. And I'm here to talk about a case that I investigated back in 2012, which I found intriguing because it had a lot of integral aspects to a relationship that ultimately devolved into something very horrific.
And not to chump the gun, but we've got an axe involved.
We certainly do have an axe involved, and ironically, in looking at these crime scene photos, we also have in the front of the location a palm reader place, which had nothing to do with the case. But I presume that maybe if this victim had in some way went over there, could conceivably maybe her fortune would have been different. And I'm not trying to minimize the outcome of this thing, but it is kind of fascinating, because I was under the impression that these folks could predict your future, but apparently not in this case. Anyways, I'll leave it at that.
So let's jump right in. I mean, this is 2012. We're in my hometown of Pasadena, California, which sits at the base of the San Gabriel Valley. It's a beautiful town. It's got a very nice neighborhood. It's got some not so nice neighborhoods. Very diverse. A lot of white, African American, black, Chinese, all types of Asians, brown people. I'm Pakistani myself. And you got a call. I think let's do. You got a late night call. Let's get started.
Okay. Well, again, the infamous late night call around 1 o'clock in the morning, and there I am putting a suit on and responding to this location, having been dispatched.
Now you're at home, or are you in the office?
Oh, I'm at home. Definitely at home. Generally, on any of these kind of situations, you're always at home. You're supposed to report to work if you're not in court during the daytime, and if you're not in an autopsy or doing some other, aspect of the homicide life, you generally will make it a point to try and get as much sleep as you can, because that's probably one of the things that everybody lacks in the context of this job. But that aside, I'm responding to this location, having been told that there was, in fact, a murder at this particular location on Rosemead Boulevard. And let me just caveat your description of Pasadena, which I 100% agree with. It's just very south of Colorado Boulevard, very near Colorado Boulevard. So it has all of the excitement of a city of Pasadena, with the exception of it is, in fact, in the unincorporated area.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, it's about a few miles north of downtown LA. It's the famous home of the Rose Bowl, the big annual football game every year. And you said a Temple Sheriff. So is it Temple City?
Temple City is in fact the sheriff's department that covers this particular jurisdiction.
Got it.
So with that said, Responded to the location, and as I get there, I contact and I'm looking right at this location right now. It's kind of interesting. This photo kind of describes to a large extent I guess a level of mystery and a level of horror in my estimation, because I'm looking at this photo and having been there that night, there is a long corridor of a driveway that is completely dark. It doesn't have any lighting in it. And that plays a crucial part into this investigation, because I'll explain later about that. So I get there, my partner and I get there, and as I arrive, I'm told that a elderly male, turned out to be 85 years old, had just made a confession that he had, in fact, killed his wife. And he's on the front porch of this particular location, and the deputies take him into custody. So this is what I was told. I was also told that there was a witness to this incident by way of the son of the victim, and at that point he had been detained, and his particular involvement was amazingly intriguing, because it had luck all written all over it in terms of what exactly happened to him.
And how old was the son?
The son was 24 years old.
Got it.
And our victim is a 55-year-old female. Now, let's go into the issue of having an 85-year-old been taken into custody. Now, I haven't reached that level yet, but I'll tell you right now, if I've never been in custody before, I will just say this. As an 85-year-old, I am truly going to be anxiety-ridden. You're in a jail cell. You're 85 years old. And it's 2 o'clock in the morning now, and you're by yourself. And at that point, I stopped everything. And I said to myself, if that was my grandfather, what would I do? Well, I would go and render some type of psychological aid to him to ease his mind. That was my thinking. I wasn't worried about the crime scene. The crime scene was contained. We had plenty of law enforcement maintaining this. The witness was detained. So I immediately told my partner, I said, stop what you're doing. First and foremost, we're going to need a search warrant anyways to get into the location. Now, people often believe that they don't need a search warrant. They, in fact, do need a search warrant because anything and everything that is, in fact, procured by way of law enforcement has to, in fact, fall under the umbrella of the Fourth Amendment. I had to start working on that in addition to dealing with a suspect who is 85 years old. I'm driving as fast as I can down to the station, and fortunately for me, there was a Mandarin-speaking deputy that worked at that station. And at that point, I basically asked for his assistance, and I read this elderly man who was frail. He was scared. It was evident, having read his emotions. And he definitely had a whole high level of anxiety.
And you're assuming you said Mandarin speaking deputy, so I'm assuming this man was Chinese and didn't have a great grasp of the English language?
Oh, yeah, I'm assuming that he had no grasp of the English language, but I'm just assuming because everything that that I did was, in fact, in Mandarin with this Mandarin-speaking Asian deputy, which is, to me, that's a very vital part, having multilingual individuals working in law enforcement. I think that's very crucial. So, again, he's in a lone cell. He's in a booking cell. I get there. I solicit the services of one of the deputies that speaks Mandarin, and I specifically told this deputy, I said, when you read him his Miranda rights, I want everything said to him in Mandarin, and I want you to ask him if he understands. So every line that I read to him, he was to understand, because I have to also check on his senility. I mean, those are one of the issues so when you look at that in its totality, you got to look at the many aspects, especially his age, potentially his senility, the prospect of him maybe being on medication. Things of that nature truly play a part in this whole experience. So, anyways, that aside, get to talking with him, and he agrees to speak with me. And we proceed. He proceeds to tell me that he believed that his bride, who he had been married to, I think, for a few years, had just brought over her son, her biological son, from Shanghai. And he believed, that they were both conspiring to kill him. And I later learned, not from him, but from other information, that apparently these two folks were continually fighting over financial issues. So he's explaining this to me, and then at that point he says that was the fundamental reason why he did a preemptive strike. And then I said to him, well, what happened with the son? He goes, well, the son attacked me, and he took the axe from me. And I said, wow, okay. I'm taking everything in. I'm not going to question whether or not it's true. My objective is just to get that information from him. And the mere fact that he's talking to me, that's a good thing. So this conversation went on for about 5-10 minutes. I didn't want to get too deep into it because I understood that he was, he's got health issues. I don't know about you guys, but at 85 years old, if he manages to have that kind of energy to do what he did by way of, of what he did to his wife, I will just say that maybe he's a little healthier than he appears.
Yeah. So when you got onto the scene, I'm jumping back a little bit. You saw the victim, or what had happened? What happened was basically,
as I get there, the deputies already said that they had taken him, and I walked into the house and I saw the wife, and she was. And then I didn't know where the son was, but I later learned that he was being detained by the deputies out in another radio car. So after that conversation, this is the most fascinating part of it. I pat myself on the back because in the world of homicide, nobody's going to pat you on the back, okay? But they will kick you in the ass if you did something wrong.
Of course.
So as I'm driving back, I'm listening on my radio, and lo and behold, it says, paramedics are responding to Temple Station because the guy's having a distress heart condition. Wow. And so had that happened, while I was driving, I would have never been able to talk to him and got that confession. And this to me was what I'm just telling you preliminarily what I did was truly a reflection of the countless investigations that I've conducted since, I first started becoming an investigator or / detective. I just believe that there was just a whole host of experiences that I pulled from in order to understand the mentality of this particular individual, coupled with, family members that apparently have had some issues too.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'd like to learn a little bit more about the experience of when you were going down this alleyway, because I'm looking at some of these photos here, and it looks like there's a house or maybe two properties. And you were mentioning that this 85-year-old gentleman was sitting on the porch. Was the door open when you walked in? Was the victim in the bedroom in the back of the house? Just would kind of love to hear more about that scene of you walking in and what you saw, and kind of, was there any smells or was there anything kind of interesting, when you were walking through this house?
Yeah, it's funny you ask, Chris, because the door was wide open as when I arrived. Of course, like I mentioned, the 85-year-old man, he was already taken to the station. But the door was open. And I guess he had a lot of time on his hands because the wife actually slept in sort of a living room area. She was upstairs in the living room. She had put a bed in this area here. And if you look at this second photo, or the third photo, you'll see her there. This actually is the upstairs living room. She put a bed there. The husband, our 85-year-old suspect, he actually lived in the basement in this very large room, and there was no windows in it. And he had sort of a Chinese decorum, but it was fascinating. It was at this point that they weren't even sleeping together. So, and apparently I learned that they had both been. They had both met at the Empire State Building while she was visiting here from China. And apparently from Shanghai because her son was from Shanghai. So now I returned back to the crime scene and going. But let me further answer your question, Chris, because I find it interesting. If you look at this photo here, there is a number of head axe marks on the victim's face. She basically was asleep, and he came down with the axe several times, ultimately killing her while she was asleep. There is no way this frail 85-year-old man would have been able to do this had it not been for her asleep. Mind you, he did this around, I would say, about 1 a.m, maybe 12:45. Interestingly enough, her son, who she had brought in from Shanghai, he was about 6'2", weighed about 235 pounds. Big guy. I mean, big guy. And mind you, our suspect is probably about 5'4", weighed about 120 pounds. So,
Wow.
So just to give you a sequence of what happened. So I talked to the son, who, by the way, also doesn't speak anything but Mandarin. He just came in. And I get to talking with him, and he tells me basically that he was asleep as well, when suddenly he was awakened by the suspect bringing down the axe on his head.
Oh my God.
So he was able to block the axe with his blanket.
Oh my goodness.
And now the struggle for the axe. And mind you, I mean, if, as big as this guy was, he just popped him in the head and pushed him away. But instead, he grabs the axe. While he's doing that, he's dialing 911.
Oh my God.
So now he's like fighting for the axe, calling 911. Ultimately, he commandeers the axe. And I am not in any way, shape, or form spiritual, but the man had just killed his wife. Moments later, he's now walking into the room where this guy's asleep, the son is asleep, and suddenly he's awakened, and an axe is coming down. Did somebody wake him up?
Yeah. Talk about a close encounter.
I mean, he had to have heard his mom struggle a bit. Or
Nothing.
I don't know
Nothing.
where in the house they're all situated, or
probably about. So here's the living room where she was sleeping, and if you go down maybe about another 30 feet, she's actually in a bedroom with a closed door. So, and again, there was no struggle. Maybe he heard the thump of the axe coming down on her skull.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but he didn't realize that anything was happening until he actually saw him coming down with the axe on his head, and he blocked it with his blanket.
Wow. And how many times did he come down with the axe?
On the son?
On the
wife?
On the wife.
I think like 4 times.
Okay.
Yeah, it's what I gathered from the autopsy. So the son tells me this. He then commandeers the axe, runs outside, and then runs to the back house where the father's granddaughter lived. Because, mind you, this man owned all of that property, in addition to several other properties. So he was very well off financially. Long and short of it, ultimately, we ended up finding the axe in the back house. But in addition, we grabbed a search warrant for the purposes of gathering any additional evidence that may have been in the house, conceivably connecting him. It's really difficult, to be candid with you, when you're processing a scene like this, to have DNA or blood, because they live together. So any and all evidence is conceivably going to be, hey, how could it not be there? He lives there.
Yeah.
So that's one of the biggest concerns we have. So we have to use other circumstantial evidence to, in fact, connect the defendant, or in the case, the suspect. In this case, we have the axe, and we could probably get DNA from the handle by way of his perspiration. Honestly, I'm looking at this axe that was found in the back room, and I said to myself, why would this gentleman use an axe? I mean, I'm thinking to myself, well, what's he going to axe? Cut a tree? I mean, he's not like a farmer. He lives in an urban area. So there's a potential. The prospect in my mind was he may have procured this axe for the sole purpose of committing this act. And so with that said, interesting enough. So when they transported him to the station, ultimately confessed, and he ends up, he actually survived the hospital stay, and then we ended up, I took this to the district attorney's office, where they filed murder and attempted murder charges on him. Wow. So
I don't want to jump to the case immediately, but maybe that's the next step here. But I'm curious, and you don't have to answer now, but I'm sure the defense put up a case on self-defense, because he clearly felt, or at least he said, in danger, that there was a plot against him. But was there anything uncovered, or was any testimony of his where, that it could even seem somewhat reasonable that he was fearing for his life? Or was there anything that the daughter and not the daughter, but the son and the wife had taken any steps to make him feel in danger?
No. And I basically try to explore that avenue. I honestly believe, having pretty much investigated it in all of its glory, and I found, in my estimation, he was just jealous at the fact that the son was there, taking all that attention from him. And in essence, he was going to eliminate that. Because to me, anybody that goes to this extent to eliminate somebody has to feel a level of jealousy, a level of lack of control, and certainly a level of envy in order to get to that point. And you're 85 years old. So how could you conceivably think to yourself that, hey, I'm going to commit murder for the purposes of eliminating those emotions within me? That's what I gathered. And in terms of any kind of motive on the part of the wife or the son to conspire to take this guy, I'll tell you what, that son was the nicest kid I've ever met. He was 24 years old and had no malicious thought in his mind. He was overwhelmed. When I talked to him, he's like, wow, I come to visit my mother and then she gets murdered.
Wow.
You know, I mean, I felt bad for this young man, because here he is, you know, coming over to visit his mother. Mother loves him. She transferred him all the way over here. And, you know, I don't think he had planned on staying. As a matter of fact, shortly after this happened, he went back to Shanghai. He didn't want to be part of this anymore.
Yeah.
You know, so it wasn't like, oh my God, I'm in America, let's just celebrate. No, it was more like, hey, I haven't seen my mom in a while. I want to come see her like anybody else. And then this happens, you know. So.
Oh, so he was just visiting.
Yeah, he was just visiting, but there was that concern that this man was now getting less attention from his wife, and that I think that was in fact the primary motivation. I don't see any other.
For just the untrained listeners, can you quickly explain the difference between like murder one and heat of passion murders and what the difference might be?
Well, you know, first and foremost, anytime you have the death of an individual, regardless of what the circumstances that led to it, whether it be a vehicular manslaughter and a hit and run, or something of this nature where he's come down in an act, the district attorney is always going to charge them with murder. That's going to be the primary goal. It's just so they start at the top and then they work their way down. So in essence, as an investigator, when you file a case, it's going to be murder. However, once they start to deal with the allegations and the circumstances and the issues that are associated with this case, then you start to bring it down to a lesser type of experience. I mean, I arrested a guy one time for murder, and he tells me, this guy, his name was Jojo, a gangster, hardcore, former boxer, and he says, yeah, he hits the guy as hard as he could. And it was some hype, and he goes, I was there to protect my neighborhood, and so I hit him, and the guy fell back and hit his head and died. And Jojo was a hardcore gangster, was a parolee, and so forth and so on. So I said, they called it self-defense. He walked.
Wow.
You see, so, but yet we arrested him for murder. So we start at the top, and then when it comes down, second-degree murder, manslaughter, all of those others, those are for the legal interpretation aspect of it, in terms of the mitigation, in terms of any potential problems, self-defense, and things of that nature.
Right. And that affects the various sentencing levels. If it's proved to be not murder one or second degree or manslaughter, your punishment or time in jail or whatnot gets affected by establishing those various different rubrics to get to those convictions.
Agreed. And more than that, it's also included, and I don't want to get too technical here, but when we go into jury instructions, a jury will sometimes be instructed to take into consideration, although the people have in fact alleged murder, you could also, based on the arguments and everything else, you could actually charge them with manslaughter. So they give the jury sometimes that option. But again, that's way beyond my purview. Mm-hmm. My objective is to find out what he got. what I have, arrest him for that, and then let the district attorney do what they want. And then ultimately, when it gets into a trial phase, then the judge may take those factors into consideration. Anyways, so I file this with the district attorney's office, and we get a murder charge, right? And it's actually premeditated. So 187 of the penal code here in California is that, it's malice aforethought, meaning, obviously he thought about it before he did it. But more than that, now he's 85 years old, and the sympathy level has to kick in, right? So here he's coming in a wheelchair, because now the jury's looking at him. It's analogous to, I love these cases. You get this hardcore gang member who's got tattoos on his neck, big tattoo, he's bald, he's got a big tattoo on his head and his neck and his eyes, and he comes into court and he now has a suit on, which, is 3 sizes too big, and he's sitting there very collegiately, That's the same with this guy. Let's bring him in a wheelchair because, God forbid, the jury doesn't know him by any other way. Yeah. And he's now walking in or, being pushed in. Yeah. The defendant was found guilty. Mind you, at 85 years old, they have several facilities. And I'm going to presume, based on this situation, that based on his age and the level of anxiety, I'm sure this man is not with us anymore, not unless he has the very long life. But nonetheless, he was convicted, and a little epilogue to this story was the son sued the estate and ended up getting like $3.2 million off of a lawsuit, and because the old man was had a lot of assets. So in that regards, pretty much, he's now living in Shanghai, probably living lavishly, but unfortunately at the expense of his mom, which I'm sure he didn't anticipate doing. Had he not shown up, think about it this way, had he not shown up, would the mother have ultimately ended up in the same set of circumstances? And the world will never know. Yeah. But the bigger issue is that when you have an 85-year-old, very unassuming Asian coming in with an axe, you wouldn't think in a million years, what are the probability of that happening,
Sure.
And so in that regards, I find it's really a tragic case. I find it just heartfelt in talking to the son who's just coming over here to visit. And by the way, I got a couple of other cases coming up on our episodes that involve similar situations, and it's just really tragic to see some of this stuff. And again, you can see that I take it very lightly, and at least that's the existential way you want to look at this. But the reality is, it really takes a toll on you, not only in the context of seeing these people, but dealing with all the emotions, dealing with all of the host of other problems that you have with these cases. So in that regards, I find myself kind of psychologically impacted by these cases. But that aside, and I say that on behalf of everybody that's ever done these cases, and I'll talk about some of these other cases, especially we got one coming up, and I won't give you any details, but it's a fascinating case in terms of what happened with this one couple that really loved each other, but ultimately the conclusion to that relationship was not good. And it involves, I'll give you a prelude. It involves a shootout. Wow. I won't tell you who the ultimate, I won't say any more than that.
Yeah, well, Uncle Rich, thank you for taking us through. I mean, I think we can all try and play either lawyer or jury or judge when we hear the facts, but your insight as the investigator then the detective is invaluable, and we really appreciate it.
Not a problem. Yeah, I really enjoy doing this, honestly, and I really enjoy sharing this. And I really enjoy all the questions that you guys ask because they're very insightful, and they give me sort of a cathartic feeling in terms of helping me out go through all this. No one's ever going to know the mind in terms of people's motivations. And that is the scary part about these type of investigations, you know, whether it be an active shooter or somebody carrying an axe up to the bedroom and, you know, pounding it on his wife. I mean, just ask yourself, how come we could never know what exactly was going through somebody's mind when they committed that act? Mm-hmm. And that's the most concerning part when I was doing the job.
All right.
We'll leave it at that.
It is. When death awaits.
And we will have another episode coming up, right, guys?
There we go. Of course.
All right. Sounds great.
Everyone,
the lover's squirrel.
The lover's squirrel. All right, everyone. Take care.